Welcome back to American Medicine Today. I'm joined by Ethan Euchre and world-renowned orthopedic surgeon Dr. Alfred Bonatti. Now, until fairly recently, cyborg-like enhancements and modifications to humans have been kind of the stuff of science fiction. But a new report is showing how the latest advancements in biotechnology and genetic modifications could lead to creating superhumans. Joining us to discuss is the report's author, David Broyles, Director of the Special Activities and Intelligence Program at the Washington Research and Analysis Organization, CNA. Thank you for being here, David.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. So can you describe exactly what you mean by superhuman?
Yeah, that's right. So humans have always had this innate desire to improve themselves, right? You look back at the history of technology that we've developed beyond what we're born with, right? We wear clothing, we use tools, we have things like pacemakers, smartphones, the list goes on and on. But the stuff that we're seeing now, it's starting to creep into the area of being able to change our hardware, meaning our physical bodies or our genetic makeup. So it's still maybe a little bit of the distant future before we see Iron Man's exoskeleton come to life. But that's the type of path that we're currently embarked upon.
So tell us about CRISPR. We've actually talked about it on the program before. It's kind of like gene editing, correct?
Correct.
But define what CRISPR is for people who may not be familiar with it.
That is basically it, right? It's actually an acronym that stands for something, but the acronym doesn't help you understand what it is at all. So the easiest thing to remember when you hear CRISPR is that it's a more powerful gene editing technique for researchers so that they can more precisely edit the genome of any living organism. And there are other tools out there to modify genes and do those sorts of changes. But again, CRISPR has allowed, it's a much more flexible, easier to adapt to any particular thing that you're interested in doing. And it's basically unlocking the capability for more rapid generation of new changes that can be done.
We hear these stories about like designer babies in China and researchers that are combining like monkey genes and putting them in human embryos. Don't you think this raises some moral and ethical red flags?
Absolutely. And if you recall, a few years back, there was the announcement of the Chinese scientist who created the so-called CRISPR babies, where he claimed that he had used CRISPR tools to modify embryos and then brought the embryos to term. But an important thing to keep in mind is progress is inevitable with these technologies. So we're going to continue to see the development of more powerful tools, and they're going to become more accessible and more relevant across more aspects of our life as we go on, just as all technology continues to improve. And right now, there are ethical boards in place that oversee the types of research that are allowable. And again, if you recall, again, with that CRISPR baby announcement a couple of years ago, there was a very rapid and global condemnation that happened against that type of research. So, it won't prevent such things from happening in isolation in the future. But again, these are the types of things we're going to have to be discussing as a society, as a global society, about how are we going to use these technologies as they become more powerful, as we become more capable of unlocking and modifying ourselves. Where are we going to take this, and potentially where are we not going to take this?
I always mention the island of Dr. Moreau to Ethan, and he always kind of plays it off like, that's never going to happen. But it seems like we're taking steps there. And when they're talking about trying to grow organs for transplant, is it going to be something where these beings have a brain? And then certainly if they do, then they're living creatures. Aren't we doing something very bad?
Yeah, I think again, this is part of the scientific effort is trying to figure out what are the boundaries going to be, and where can we research in areas that we're comfortable and know what we're doing. So I think it was just a couple days ago, or maybe a week ago, that the National Institute of Health released a report looking at some of these more envelope techniques, shall we say. I think the particular case was looking at using neurons, brain cells, in different ways that are kind of interesting and could be questionable. And again, their initial assessment was, in this particular case, they didn't see any signs that the things that were being done were creating any level of consciousness or any sort of being that was feeling pain. And again, so there's a panel and again, researchers that are looking at these sorts of things and trying to make determinations that say, okay, well, we know what areas we do want to avoid and what we say is not going to be acceptable? Can we ensure that our research is not crossing that line? And if we are getting close, then how do we think about it?
So let's talk about biotechnology now. What are some of the things that are, I guess, in the works that could change us into superhumans, either now or down the road?
Right. Well, in the near term, the focus is very much on corrective actions. And the same can be said for genetic modification. So, in both these sort of areas, the medical research is very much focused on correcting things that are currently not working properly in humans. You're seeing the development of more powerful and portable prosthetics, limb replacement that can more readily recreate the act of moving a human hand through a person's sort of remaining neuroskeletal structure. And we're also seeing the development of just the cusp of being able to restore vision. You fast forward a decade or so, that technology is again going to become higher resolution, more portable, more available to people. Will we develop an arm that is well beyond the power of a normal human arm? Absolutely. How will we use that technology? That still remains to be seen.
So, doctor, do you think in the foreseeable future they'll be able to edit the genes of a baby even before it's born to eliminate, risks for congenital illnesses and things like that? They're already kind of doing stuff like that, aren't they?
Yeah, that would certainly be one of the goals. For example, people discover, right? You have a hereditary predilection towards a certain type of disease or maybe heart disease or things like that. It's because your genetic makeup that has been passed down through the generations has certain aspects to it that make you more likely to have that disease. So as we start to understand better those defects and also can ensure that changing them doesn't cause other undesirable effects to happen, which is an important caveat, we will have the potential to be able to start to eliminate those types of challenges and those long-standing diseases that people have had. And some of the current efforts that are currently underway, for example, are looking at very specific genetically caused diseases such as cystic fibrosis, sickle cell anemia, Huntington's disease, right? The list goes on and on of diseases that arise from genetic defects in our code. And it's those types of things that we could potentially start to eliminate.
Can you tell us what biohackers are? And are they a good thing or do they pose any threats?
This is probably the most surprising thing to me when I was researching this topic. And the biohackers there's no set definition, right? There's no membership or club or anything like that. It could be as easy as wearing a fitness tracker and trying to maximize your workouts. But it could also be trying to do some little genetic tweaking or maybe getting chip implants and other things that allow you to interface with your electronics. So there's these interesting communities, both physical, some of them meet right in their local communities, but certainly over the internet that are able to get together and explore what all this new technology means to us. Sometimes it's testing on maybe like yeast or cuttlefish or some other organism, but certainly there are some people that are very interested in trying on like what happens when I try to do this. That's probably where it gets a little bit more questionable, but that's an interesting group, and it's interesting to watch the sorts of things that they're doing.
Well, it's certainly fascinating. Thank you for taking the time to be on the show, David Broyles. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.